see how accurate we got it. Right dead on that side, exactly 26.5, so I'm spot on. Hey guys, Jonathan Hitchcock here with the Custom Craftsman Woodworking. Hey, a few months ago I posted a video showing my new track saw table, cut table that I made, and had some questions and comments on that, but I never actually used it in the video. I haven't needed to use my track saw. My last several commission builds were all smaller, and so they could all be done on the table saw. Yesterday I was working, still working on puzzle tables here, and so I was breaking down 3 different sheets of 1/4 inch full sheets of plywood, and I used the cut table for the first time, and it worked wonderfully. And so I wanted to just show you that process. I won't go over, how I made it and stuff. I'll link that video that I made down in the description if you want to check that out. But just a quick kind of rundown of what it is, and I'll show you how I set it up and then how it works. So if you didn't see that first video, here's the table itself. It is made entirely of 1 sheet of MDF and then 2 sawhorses. And these sawhorses have a spot for a 2x4 to make a table into. They are fold down, and so everything I'll show you, I'm gonna break it all down and then show you how I assemble it really quickly. But I found this was a really good idea rather than buying store-bought 2x4s, which were really warped and not very straight, and having to spend time milling those. I bought 1 sheet of MDF, which was more expensive, but it's 3/4 of an inch, and then I just laminated 2 pieces together. You can see the line there. So that's a full 1.5 inches, just like a 2x4, and then I actually cut it a little thicker. I added a little bit more rigidity, so this is 4 inch wide. You could do whatever you really wanted to. But I have 2 long rails that go a full 8 feet, and then a bunch of these cross sections that have enough space just to overhang. And I love it because I'll show you, you don't have to clamp down any of this. There's a nice friction here, so there's no movement. And these are sacrificial. As you can see, there's, I was doing some cross cutting, and these were longer rips that I was making on plywood. And so they're sacrificial. They'll eventually have to be replaced, but that's cheap enough and easy enough to do, and a lot faster than trying to mill up some 2x4s. So here's some of the plywood. I still have to make a few cuts on there, so I'll show you how I do that. The purple foam is what I had used in the past, and that's, again, what I've seen most of what people do online is they just buy a sheet of this purple foam. Mine is not honestly thick enough. I think mine's only 3/4 of an inch, but it is completely beat up, and it's very not flat. And so going on the floor, especially when it gets freezing, it feels like 8 degrees right now outside. And so I don't really want to be hanging out on the concrete floor if I don't have to. And so I actually got much more accurate results. You can see here's some of the cuts I was making yesterday. These are all drawer bottoms that I'm cutting up. And so that's what I was working on, and it worked phenomenally. And so I'll show you how I set this up and then how it works. Okay, so one of the key aspects for me to have a cut table was that it was fully removable, because I work out of my 2-car garage. For the most part, I work just on one side of the 2-car garage. I did pull my truck out right here to have this space for today, but I wanted something that was stored out of the way, so I don't want something permanent like an MFT kind of tabletop, because it just wouldn't work for my setup. So this can all be torn down, and I'm going to show you really quick. I'll speed up this video so you don't have to watch me, but I'll set my timer here, and we can just time all of the lumber and the sawhorses. I can store kind of over in the corner and under my workbench, so they're out of the way when I don't need them. But I'll time and see how long it actually takes me to set it up here. So here we go. Okay, there you have it. It's reset back up. The time was 1 minute and 58 seconds. So the video will be sped up, but I was just going normal speed. So it takes about 2 minutes to set up and probably less than that to tear back down. So not a super long time at all, which is useful if you're building things. Obviously time is money a little bit. I didn't tell you pricing. I already had the sawhorses. So all in, the cost of this whole setup, other than the time it took to kind of rip all these down and glue them up, I paid $45 for 1 sheet of MDF, which is more expensive than 2x4s, but a lot less work. And so I saved money by saving time in that sense. And then these are very stable. They're not going to warp. I don't have to worry about them So I'm not going to spend a lot of time showing you how exactly to set up and do a track saw cut. I'll spend a little bit, but there are a lot of videos online that can show you that. And I'm happy to share more. If you have questions in the comments, I'll show you. But here's a piece of plywood, 1/4 inch plywood, that I already ripped a section out of to make the drawers, and now I have to make a couple cross cuts with it. Let me show you really quickly the setup I did just to make these long rips. So I have a pretty lengthy video on my channel that shows some of the different ends that I went through to kind of get more accuracy with my track saw. I had a project that I got very frustrated with when trying to do these long cuts, and I was having not a lot of success with the track saw staying accurate, and so I solved a lot of those issues. So I'll link that video again so you can see it, so I don't just play repeat for you here. But a couple just minor things to mention. First thing, if I'm making a long rip, I have two 55-inch pieces of track. These are made by Wen. I think the combined cost of these with the connectors on Amazon is like $65. I'll put that as well in the description if you want to check that out. These are great. They're really accurate. They work with just about all of the major track saw brands. I have the Makita, and so it works flawlessly with this track. And so I'm not a big advocate of spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars just on track. This seems to be just as accurate in my opinion. But to connect these, that's where you start to lose a little bit of accuracy, is trying to get these connected and still keep them straight. You can go and spend, and I almost did, hundreds of dollars, like $300, $400, $500, even $1,000 on some of these really machined metal straight edges that are perfectly straight to within, you know, 1/1000th of a degree over the course of its entire 5-foot span or something. But that's not practical for me personally. And so what I ended up doing is I needed a really stiff straight edge. And so I just I thought, you know, my most accurate tool is my table saw. I'm just gonna create my own straight edge. If it's straight enough off my table saw, that's how I do all my builds anyway. So I took a piece of really flat, really stable Baltic birch that I had, and I made a 5-foot long straight edge. I did the whole process where you rip it, flip it, rip it again, flip it, rip it again. And over the course, you're just taking off, you know, maybe a 1/16th each time. That process of continuing to rotate it actually creates even more parallel and flat sides over the course of, you know, 3-4 times doing it. So it's very, very accurate. I do have a known straight edge that I've lined up, and it's dead flat accurate, but it's nice and stiff compared to the one that I have, which is a level, and it's a little bit more bendy. So I do the whole setup. If I'm going to connect these, I do it on my table saw so that I can have a flat reference surface to do it. My bench I could use, but it's filled with projects right now. So here's how I do it. I just use this straight edge. And one of the key things, I heard Sedge from Festool on a video talk about this. You don't want to connect, I was doing for the longest time, butting these up with each other. You actually don't want to do that. I leave about a 1/16th to 1/8 of an inch of a gap between the two connectors, or the two rails. And then I slide in my connector here. I always do the top first. And I alternate. I don't know if that makes a difference. It's what I do when I rotate my tires to get a good lock, and so it kind of makes sense, I guess, mentally for me, but I have no idea if that makes any difference. Tighten these down, keeping it pulled up against my known straight edge. Perfectly flat, everything's lined up. The next process before I ever make a cut, disconnect here, make sure I don't accidentally start this up. Okay, so before I ever make a cut, I put it on one of my rails, and I have this dialed in now. You can listen, there's no sound whatsoever because there's no wobble. And so I got the I don't know what these are called, the tighteners down so that it slides nicely on the rails, but there's no wobble at all. And then I always like to check that section. There's usually a click like that that you'll hear, but sometimes it'll get caught up, which obviously is not what you want when you're making a long cut. And so that's perfect. It's sliding along there well, and so that's good to check. The next thing I check is I always drop this down all the way out, and I take my square and I make sure that my blade is perfectly 90. I did change and put this blade on. Another little hot tip for you, these CMT ITK, they make a thin kerf track saw blade. They're awesome. This is the 56 tooth one. Completely saved my track saw use. The Makita one that comes stock burned out really quickly and I could barely make cuts with it, and I switched. I have the 24 tooth Rip Blade and then the 56 tooth Crosscut one, and they work flawlessly. Changed the whole track saw for me, so I love those. But I always, if I change the blade, I always double check and make sure that it's exactly 90, which I had to make a few adjustments yesterday when that happened. Then, next step is to set the depth. I ended up setting it to 15. That's a little bit over 1/8 of an inch, but it worked perfect for me yesterday. So I'll set that depth, and then I'll always check it before I go ahead and make a cut. But now I'm all set and I'm ready to actually make some cuts. Really quickly, I can't get the right camera angle for you here while I'm in the frame. So here's what it looks like with the track completely laid out. So you can see 110 inches of track gives you just enough overhang. You can rip a full piece of plywood and not run off the track. So that's perfect. So one of the beauties and reasons that I built this table versus using the purple foam insulation on the ground was I know this is, people have different opinions. I love to use track saw clamps when I'm especially making big long cuts or final cuts on, you know, really important cross cuts or on a table or something where it's the final dimension. The reason is I had an incident this past summer where I made a cross cut with my saw on a really important epoxy table, and the whole track shifted as I was doing that, and it changed the whole dimension. I had to contact the client, and it was a big thing because it shifted everything a little bit over. And so I don't like to deal with that, and I'm just more comfortable always using a clamp. It takes a couple extra minutes, but you can't do that if you're flat on foam insulation. This elevates everything up so that I can easily set this in and clamp down. So I put my track right on the line wherever I want to make my cut, and I put one of these on each end. I can do it on the same end over there, and now my track isn't going to move at all. It's locked in. And you can see this whole table is pretty stable. None of these pieces that are just resting on top of the MDF, these MDF 2x4s, are shifting at all. And so once I get that all done, I'm clamped in where I want to be. I'll fire up the saw, obviously drop it down. One quick tip, another sedge tip from Festool. I watched a video on accuracy from him, and he talked about too many people go to the side and put kind of horizontal pressure on their track saw, which slightly bows it, especially in the middle. So he talked about really making sure as you're making your cut that you just consistently are just pushing vertically forward. And so all of these kind of things I put into practice yesterday, and it gave me the best results that I've had. And so I'm really pleased with this table. Works great. Let me show you really quickly. I'm going to actually make some cross cuts here on this piece. So let me show you exactly how I get set up for that then. Okay, so now I'm set up here. I got the rails taken apart, so I just need one now for these cross cuts. I made my mark using a T-square. I just drew my line where I want to make my cut. So how I adjust the kind of cut table in order to support cross cuts instead of the long rips is this. I'm going to take, this is the one that I was using yesterday. As you can see, there are a lot of different cuts, so I'll kind of keep using the same one for right now, so I don't have to replace, I don't junk them all up at once. But the nice part about this is that these are just fully easily moved, and so I can just shift it where I need to, and I'm going to butt it right up against another one and just make sure that my support, so now I can see where the line is, I can see where I'm going to make the cut, and I got full support right here for my track. So I'm just going to line it up on that line. Make sure we got power. Plug in our dust collection. And I'm going to break my own rule here. I said I always like to use clamps. This is an oversized cut, and so I'm actually going to make the final cut on the table saw. So I'm going to go without clamps. These shorter ones, I'm a little bit more confident I can kind of hold it steady. So I'm breaking my own rule that I just told you not to do. All right, let's make a cut. There is our cut. Let's see how accurate we got it. It's supposed to be 26.5 inches. Right dead on that side. This is going to probably be more on how well I lined it up. Exactly 26.5. So I'm spot on, which when I used to use my track saw, I would always be off by, I don't know, a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch very often. And so I got very frustrated with it. All of these kind of changes that I've made, and this table, because it's perfectly flat, I'm not on the floor, it's made it so much more accurate and really improved my track saw setup. So it doesn't have to be an expensive MFT table. I don't have any dog holes. I don't have any hinges or anything like that, because I still like to use my table saw 90% of the time. But if I'm breaking down something that doesn't fit like this, this works beautifully and I can still get really super accurate results. So I hope that helps you guys. Let me know if you have questions, and I'm happy to help answer if you have your own track saw table setups or improvements that you would make. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.